The night Dean Martin walked away from Ava Gardner, the silence that broke a love story. The golden years. The air in Hollywood in the mid-1950s shimmered with a peculiar blend of ambition, glamour, and a barely contained wildness. It was an era of larger-than-life personalities where the silver screen cast long, intoxicating shadows over the real lives of its stars. Among them, two figures burned with an almost incandescent intensity: Dean Martin, the effortlessly cool crooner, half of the most successful comedy duo of the time, and Ava Gardner, the tempestuous siren, whose beauty was as legendary as her fiery spirit. Their paths, destined to intertwine, promised a romance as dazzling and ultimately as tragic as any film noir. Dean Martin, born Dino Crocetti, had perfected the art of nonchalance. With Jerry Lewis, he had conquered vaudeville, radio, and film, becoming a household name. But beneath the easy smile and the ever-present cigarette, Dean was a man of quiet complexities. He craved stability, a sense of home, a refuge from the relentless demands of stardom. He was married to Jean Beager, a woman who provided him with the calm domesticity he sought, and together they were raising a growing family. Yet, even in the midst of this seemingly perfect life, there was a part of Dean that remained unfulfilled, a yearning for a passion that transcended the comfortable. Ava Gardner, on the other hand, was a force of nature. Discovered in rural North Carolina, she had blossomed into one of the most stunning women ever to grace the screen. Her beauty was raw, untamed, and utterly captivating. But her life off-screen was a whirlwind of passionate affairs and tumultuous marriages, most famously to Mickey Rooney, Artie Shaw, and the love of her life, Frank Sinatra. Ava lived with an intensity that few could match, a hunger for experience that often led her down paths of heartbreak. She was fiercely independent, allergic to pretense, and possessed a vulnerability that she guarded fiercely beneath a veneer of toughness. Their initial encounters were, predictably, electric. Hollywood was a small town for its elite, and their circles often overlapped. Dean, with his smooth charm and understated wit, was a stark contrast to the often volatile men Ava had loved. He didn't chase her with the same desperate intensity as Sinatra, nor did he try to mold her like Shaw. Instead, Dean offered a quiet admiration, a knowing glance that seemed to say, "I see you, Ava, beyond the glamour and the gossip." And Ava, weary from the emotional roller coaster of her past, found herself drawn to his calm demeanor, his genuine warmth, and the surprising depth she sensed beneath his cool exterior. Their romance began subtly, a series of stolen moments, lingering conversations at late-night parties, and shared laughter that cut through the superficiality of their world. They found common ground in their shared disdain for Hollywood's phoniness, their love for good music, and a melancholic streak that both tried to hide from the public eye. Dean, the family man, found himself increasingly captivated by Ava's untamed spirit, a stark contrast to the predictable rhythm of his life. Ava, the free spirit, found a surprising solace in Dean's steady presence, a quiet strength that promised a different kind of love. Their public appearances together were rare at first, carefully orchestrated to avoid scandal, given Dean's marital status. But the whispers began, as they always did in Hollywood. A shared glance at a premiere, a private dinner witnessed by a discreet waiter, a late-night phone call. The chemistry between them was undeniable, a palpable force that even the most cynical observers couldn't ignore. When they were together, the room seemed to hum with an unspoken energy. Dean's usual detachment would soften, his eyes holding a warmth reserved only for her. Ava, often guarded, would relax into a playful ease, her laughter echoing with genuine joy. They were two halves of a glittering coin, both icons of their time, yet fundamentally different in their approach to life and love. Dean sought peace, Ava thrived on passion, even if it brought pain. He was the rock, she was the storm. And for a brief, intoxicating period, they believed they could weather any tempest together. They would escape the prying eyes of the press, finding refuge in secluded hideaways, or in the quiet corners of Dean's favorite Italian restaurants, where the owner knew to leave them undisturbed. In these moments, away from the glare of the spotlights, they could simply be Dino and Ava, two souls drawn together by an irresistible, dangerous magnetism. The glamour of their connection was undeniable. Imagine them at a star-studded party at Frank Sinatra's Palm Springs estate, Dean in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, a cigarette dangling casually from his fingers, his eyes scanning the room until they met Ava's. She, in a gown that clung to her curves like a second skin, her dark hair swept up, a single, knowing smile playing on her lips. They would gravitate towards each other, a silent understanding passing between them, a world of shared secrets in their gaze. This was the golden age of Hollywood, and they were its most beautiful, most complicated secret. But even in this golden glow, the first faint cracks were beginning to appear, subtle fissures in the foundation of a love built on stolen moments and unspoken desires. The weight of their individual lives, their pasts, and the relentless machinery of Hollywood were already beginning to press down on their fragile paradise. The intoxicating allure of their early romance soon began to give way to the harsh realities of their lives. Hollywood, a town built on dreams, was also a relentless machine that devoured personal lives with insatiable hunger. The whispers about Dean and Ava intensified, evolving from titillating gossip into outright scandal. Dean, ever the pragmatist, felt the pressure acutely. His career with Jerry Lewis was reaching its zenith, but their partnership was also fraying, demanding more of his energy and focus. His family, his anchor, was a constant reminder of his responsibilities, a silent reproach to the passionate chaos Ava represented. Ava, meanwhile, was navigating her own tempestuous waters. Her career was soaring, taking her to exotic locations for films like Magambo and The Barefoot Contessa. But distance, for Ava, often amplified her insecurities and her need for intense connection. She was still reeling from the emotional wreckage of her marriage to Frank Sinatra, a love that had scarred her deeply and left an indelible mark on her heart. Dean, despite his charm and affection, was not Frank. He offered a different kind of love, steadier, quieter, less dramatic. For a woman who had lived on the edge of emotional precipices, Dean's calm could sometimes feel like indifference. Their fundamental natures, once a source of fascination, now became points of friction. Dean craved a peaceful home, a predictable rhythm after the frenetic pace of his professional life. He was a man who enjoyed his solitude, his golf, his family dinners. Ava, however, was a creature of impulse, a lover of late nights, spontaneous adventures, and intense emotional exchanges. She saw Dean's quietness as a withdrawal, a lack of engagement. He saw her tempestuousness as an unnecessary drama, a threat to the tranquility he so desperately sought. "Why are you always so quiet, Dino?" Ava would ask, her voice laced with a mixture of frustration and yearning. They might be in a dimly lit booth at a Beverly Hills restaurant, the clinking of glasses and hushed conversations forming a backdrop to their private struggle. "It's like you're miles away, even when you're right here." Dean would sigh, taking a slow drag from his cigarette. "I'm thinking, Ava. Or maybe I'm just enjoying the quiet. Not everything needs to be a production." He loved her fire, but sometimes it felt like it threatened to consume him. He had enough productions in his professional life, his personal life was meant to be his sanctuary. Ava would bristle. A production? Is that what you think this is? My feelings? My need for you to actually talk to me? Her voice would rise slightly, drawing a discreet glance from a nearby waiter. I'm not one of your audiences, Dean. I need more than a charming smile and a shrug. The shadow of Frank Sinatra loomed large over their relationship, an unspoken, ever-present third party. Dean was Frank's friend, a member of the burgeoning Rat Pack that would soon define a new era of cool. This friendship, while a testament to Dean's loyalty, also created an impossible dynamic. Ava, in moments of vulnerability or anger, might inadvertently compare Dean to Frank, or worse, accuse him of not loving her with the same all-consuming passion. Dean, in turn, might resent being measured against a ghost, especially one as formidable as Sinatra. You're always comparing me to him, aren't you? Dean once said, his voice unusually sharp, after a particularly heated argument. They were in Ava's lavish Hollywood home, the scent of gardenias heavy in the night air. I'm not Frank, Ava. I never will be. And maybe that's the problem. Ava's eyes would flash, a mixture of hurt and defiance. No, the problem is you don't understand what it means to truly feel something, Dean. You keep everything locked away, behind that cool facade. I need passion, I need fire. I need to know I'm alive. These arguments, often fueled by alcohol and exhaustion, became more frequent, more cutting. They would reconcile with passionate intensity, only for the same issues to resurface days or weeks later. Dean's growing success as a solo artist after his split with Lewis, and his burgeoning career in films and as a recording artist, meant he was often on the road, performing in Las Vegas or filming in distant locations. Ava, too, was constantly traveling for her own projects. The distance, instead of making the heart grow fonder, often allowed their insecurities and unresolved issues to fester. The external pressures were relentless. Studio executives, concerned about Dean's image as a family man, subtly, and not so subtly, discouraged his involvement with Ava. The press, always eager for a scandalous headline, hounded them, turning every public appearance into a speculative circus. Ava, who despised the phoniness of Hollywood, found herself increasingly suffocated by its demands. Dean, who valued his privacy above all else, felt his personal life being dissected and judged. He began to retreat further into himself, finding solace in his golf, his family, and the carefully constructed persona of the King of Cool. The public saw the charming, unflappable Dean Martin, but few saw the man wrestling with the emotional toll of a love that was both exhilarating and exhausting. Ava, in turn, became more defiant, more determined to live life on her own terms, even if it meant alienating those who cared for her. She saw the world as a stage for her passions, while Dean saw it as a place to find peace. The cracks in their paradise were no longer subtle, they were widening, threatening to split their world apart. The silence that had once been comforting in Dean's presence now felt like a chasm, growing deeper and wider between them. Subscribe for more untold stories. If you're captivated by the hidden dramas and complex lives of Hollywood's golden age, make sure to subscribe to this channel. We delve deep into the untold stories, the passionate romances, and the heartbreaking moments that shaped the legends we still adore. Don't miss our next exploration into the lives of the stars. Hit that subscribe button now and join our community of classic Hollywood enthusiasts. The night it all ended wasn't marked by a dramatic storm or a public spectacle. It was a quiet, suffocating evening in the late 1950s in a secluded, opulent suite at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. The neon glow of the Strip filtered through the heavy drapes, casting the room in a melancholic, artificial light. Dean had just finished a grueling run of shows with the Rat Pack, the raucous energy of the stage still buzzing in his ears, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that now enveloped him and Ava. They had been arguing for hours, or perhaps it was days, the lines blurring into a continuous, low-level hum of disagreement. It wasn't a shouting match, their arguments had evolved beyond that. Now, they were surgical, cutting deep with words honed by intimacy and frustration. Ava, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her voice a raw whisper, had been pleading, demanding, challenging. "Why can't you just be here, Dean?" she had asked, her hands gesturing wildly, then falling to her sides in despair. "Why do you always pull away? Is it so much to ask for you to just feel with me?" Dean sat on the edge of the plush sofa, a half-empty glass of amber liquid in his hand, his gaze fixed on the distant lights of the city. His usual cool facade was strained, a thin veneer over a profound weariness. He loved Ava, truly, deeply. Her beauty, her fire, her unapologetic zest for life, they had drawn him in like a moth to a flame. But the flame was now burning him, threatening to consume the very essence of the peace he so desperately sought. "I am here, Ava," he said, his voice low, almost a murmur. "I'm always here. But you want a different kind of here. You want a storm, and I just want a quiet harbor." Ava scoffed, a bitter sound. "A quiet harbor? Is that what you call this? This constant push and pull? This endless dance around what we really feel?" She walked over to him, her shadow falling across his face. "You're afraid, Dino. Afraid to feel, afraid to commit, afraid to let anyone truly see you." Her words, though harsh, held a kernel of truth that stung him. He was afraid. Afraid of the intensity, afraid of the inevitable heartbreak, afraid of losing himself in the tempest that was Ava Gardner. He had a family, a life he had carefully constructed, a public persona he had meticulously maintained. Ava represented a beautiful, dangerous disruption to all of it. He had tried, God knows he had tried, to reconcile the two worlds, to bridge the chasm between his desire for her and his need for stability. But he was failing. They were both failing. He looked up at her, really looked at her, and saw the pain etched on her exquisite face, the desperation in her eyes. And in that moment, a profound clarity washed over him, cold and undeniable. He couldn't give her what she needed, and she couldn't give him what he needed. Their love, as powerful as it was fundamentally incompatible with their individual truths. To continue would be to inflict endless pain on both of them, to slowly erode the beautiful memories they had created. "I can't do this anymore, Ava," he said, his voice barely audible, but firm with a newfound resolve. He set his glass down on the coffee table with a soft thud that echoed in the sudden silence. Ava froze, her breath catching in her throat. What are you saying, Dino?" Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with a dawning horror. He stood up, his tall frame casting a long shadow over her. He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones. His eyes, usually so guarded, were filled with a deep, aching sorrow. "I'm saying, I have to walk away. For both of us." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Ava stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief, then slowly, agonizingly, they filled with tears. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek, a glistening testament to the heartbreak unfolding. "No," she whispered, shaking her head slowly. "No, you can't. Not now. Not after everything." Dean closed his eyes for a brief moment, steeling himself against the pain in her voice, the raw vulnerability that threatened to shatter his resolve. He knew this would break her, and it was breaking him too. But he also knew, with absolute certainty, that staying would break them both even more completely. He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead, a silent farewell. He could taste the salt of her tears, feel the tremor in her body. Then, he pulled back, his hands dropping from her face. He didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. He turned, his movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. He walked towards the door, each step heavy with the weight of his decision. He didn't look back. He couldn't. To look back would be to falter, to succumb to the magnetic pull of her pain, to undo the agonizing choice he had just made. He reached for the doorknob, his fingers cold against the brass. Ava stood frozen in the middle of the room, watching him go. Her mind screamed for him to stop, to turn around, to tell her it was a mistake. But no words came, only a choked sob that tore through her chest. The click of the door latch was the loudest sound she had ever heard, a definitive, irreversible punctuation mark on their love story. Then, silence. A profound, echoing silence that filled the opulent suite, a silence that was far more deafening than any argument. Ava stood there for a long time, listening to the absence, feeling the cold emptiness where his presence had been. The night Dean Martin walked away from Ava Gardner, he left behind not a storm, but a silence that broke her heart, and perhaps, a piece of his own. Share your thoughts in the comments. This pivotal moment between Dean and Ava is filled with raw emotion and difficult choices. What do you think led Dean to make this heartbreaking decision? Was it an act of self-preservation, or a tragic misunderstanding? Share your thoughts and interpretations in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives on these complex historical figures and their relationships. The silence Dean left behind in that Vegas suite reverberated through Hollywood, a quiet tremor that spoke volumes. Publicly, the separation was handled with the usual Hollywood decorum, vague statements about busy schedules and mutual respect. Privately, it was a wound that festered, leaving both Dean and Ava to navigate the painful aftermath in their own distinct ways. For Dean, walking away was an act of self-preservation, a desperate attempt to reclaim the peace he so deeply craved. He retreated further into his carefully constructed world of family, golf, and the burgeoning success of the Rat Pack. His public persona, the King of Cool, became even more entrenched, a shield against the emotional turmoil he had just endured. He poured himself into his work, churning out hit records, starring in popular films, and becoming a television sensation with The Dean Martin Show. The effortless charm, the casual wit, the ever-present drink, it all served to reinforce the image of a man untouched by the messy realities of life, a man who simply glided through existence. But beneath the polished surface, the silence of that night lingered. Dean was a private man, not one to openly display his pain. Instead, it manifested in subtle ways, a deeper reliance on his nightly drinks, a more pronounced detachment in his eyes, a quiet melancholy that only those closest to him might occasionally glimpse. He found solace in the predictable routines of his family life, the unwavering support of his wife, Jean, who understood his need for stability. Yet, even with his family, there was a part of him that remained guarded, a space that Ava had once occupied with her vibrant, chaotic energy. He had chosen peace, but it came at the cost of a certain kind of passion, a wildness he had briefly allowed himself to embrace. Ava, on the other hand, reacted with a characteristic blend of defiance and despair. Dean's departure, so quiet and definitive, had shattered her. She had been left with the echoing silence, a void that no amount of glamour or adoration could fill. Her immediate response was to flee, both physically and emotionally. She threw herself into her work, accepting roles that took her further and further from Hollywood, eventually settling in Europe. Spain, then London, became her refuge, a place where she could escape the constant scrutiny and the painful memories of a love that had promised so much and delivered such a crushing end. Her relationships after Dean continued to be tumultuous, marked by the same intensity and eventual heartbreak that had defined her past. She sought passion, a connection that could match the fire within her, but often found only fleeting moments of solace. The public saw Ava Gardner, the tragic beauty, the untamed siren who couldn't be tamed. They saw her dazzling performances, her defiant spirit, her legendary parties. But behind the bravado, Ava carried a profound loneliness, a lingering ache for a love that was both fierce and stable, a combination she seemed destined never to find. She often spoke of Dean with a wistful fondness, acknowledging the unique place he held in her heart, a man who had seen her, truly seen her, and yet had chosen to walk away. Their paths rarely crossed after that night. Hollywood was a small town, but they moved in different orbits. When they did encounter each other at industry events, there was always an unspoken tension, a lingering ghost of what had been. A brief nod, a polite smile, a fleeting glance that held a universe of shared history and unspoken regret. The silence between them was profound, a testament to the depth of their connection and the finality of its end. Dean's career soared to unprecedented heights in the 1960s. He became a cultural icon, the epitome of cool, his laid-back persona perfectly suited for the changing times. His films were box office hits, his records topped the charts, and his television show was a ratings juggernaut. He was the ultimate entertainer, seemingly effortless in his craft, always in control. But the man who had once been drawn to Ava's untamed spirit had now fully embraced the role of the detached observer, the man who kept his emotions carefully guarded. Ava's career, while still successful, took on a more melancholic hue. She continued to deliver powerful performances, her raw emotional vulnerability often shining through on screen. But her personal life remained a struggle, a series of passionate but ultimately unfulfilling relationships. She never found the lasting peace or the stable love she secretly yearned for, always chasing the elusive spark that had once burned so brightly with Dean. The separation affected them both profoundly, shaping their subsequent choices and solidifying their public images. Dean became the embodiment of effortless cool, a man who seemed to have it all but kept his true self hidden. Ava became the tragic beauty, forever searching for a love that could match her intensity. The night Dean walked away wasn't just the end of a romance, it was a defining moment that set them on divergent paths, each carrying the silent weight of what could have been. The silence after that night was not empty, it was filled with the echoes of a love that was too grand, too complicated, and ultimately, too incompatible to survive. Show your appreciation with a like. If this deep dive into the complex relationship between Dean Martin and Ava Gardner resonated with you, please hit the like button. Your support helps us bring more of these compelling stories to life and ensures that the legacies of these iconic stars continue to be explored and appreciated. The story of Dean Martin and Ava Gardner, though never officially acknowledged as a full-blown public romance, remains one of Hollywood's most intriguing what-ifs. Their brief, intense connection, culminating in that silent, definitive walk away, offers a poignant reflection on the nature of love, ambition, and the sacrifices demanded by a life lived in the spotlight. It's a narrative that transcends mere gossip, delving into the profound complexities of two extraordinary individuals who, despite their undeniable attraction, were fundamentally incompatible. Their impact on each other, though cut short, was undeniable. Dean, the man who craved stability, was briefly drawn into Ava's tempestuous world, experiencing a passion that perhaps he had never allowed himself before. It forced him to confront his own desires, his own fears, and ultimately to make a choice that defined his path forward. Ava, who lived for intensity, found in Dean a quiet strength, a different kind of love that offered a glimpse of peace. His departure, while devastating, also solidified her independent spirit, pushing her further into a life lived on her own terms, even if it meant enduring profound loneliness. What if they had stayed together? The question lingers, a tantalizing whisper in the annals of Hollywood history. Would Dean have been able to reconcile his need for peace with Ava's need for passion? Would Ava have found the stability she secretly yearned for within Dean's calm embrace? It's likely their union would have been a destructive force, a constant battle between two powerful, opposing wills. Dean's aversion to drama and Ava's inherent need for it would have clashed endlessly, perhaps consuming them both. Their love, while potent, lacked the foundational compatibility required for a lasting partnership. It was a love born of fire and ice, beautiful to behold, but ultimately unsustainable. Their story serves as a powerful testament to the price of fame. In the glittering cage of Hollywood, personal lives were public property, scrutinized and judged. The pressure to maintain an image, to conform to societal expectations, was immense. Dean, the family man, and Ava, the femme fatale, were both trapped by their personas, making it nearly impossible for their unconventional love to flourish without immense personal and professional cost. Their relationship was a quiet rebellion against the rigid moral codes of the 1950s, a challenge to the unspoken rules of who could love whom. Dean's legacy as the King of Cool was cemented in the years following their separation. His effortless charm, his laid-back demeanor, his ability to make everything seem easy, these became his trademarks. But one can't help but wonder if that cool exterior was also a carefully constructed defense mechanism, a way to keep the world, and perhaps himself, at arm's length after the emotional intensity of his time with Ava. He achieved unparalleled success, but perhaps at the cost of a certain emotional vulnerability. Ava's legacy, too, was shaped by her tumultuous loves. She remained the untamed beauty, the passionate actress whose raw emotional performances captivated audiences. Her life, a series of grand romances and heartbreaks, became as legendary as her films. She never truly found lasting domestic bliss, always chasing the elusive spark, the profound connection that had both thrilled and tormented her. Her story is a testament to the power of living authentically, even if it leads to pain, and a poignant reminder that some spirits are simply too wild to be contained. Their story, though ending in silence, speaks volumes about the human condition. It explores the difference between intense attraction and sustainable partnership, the sacrifices demanded by ambition, and the profound impact of personal choices on one's destiny. Dean Martin and Ava Gardner were two stars who burned brightly, their paths crossing for a brief, incandescent moment, leaving behind a trail of stardust and a haunting question: what if love isn't always enough? The night Dean Martin walked away from Ava Gardner was not just the end of a romance. It was a defining moment that underscored the complexities of their lives, their careers, and the enduring myth of Hollywood love. It reminds us that even in the most glamorous of settings, human hearts grapple with universal struggles: the search for connection, the yearning for peace, and the courage to make impossible choices. Their silence, in the end, spoke louder than any words, echoing through time as a powerful narrative of what could have been, and what ultimately had to be. Share this story and keep the legends alive. This story of Dean Martin and Ava Gardner is a powerful reminder of the human drama behind the Hollywood glamour. If you found this narrative compelling and insightful, please share this video with your friends, family, and fellow classic Hollywood enthusiasts. Help us keep these incredible stories alive and ensure that the complex legacies of these legendary figures continue to inspire reflection and conversation. Your share makes a huge difference. Perfito, Sergio. Entregue a historia completa conform solicitatu.